Tonight, Hezbollah and Israel exchange rocket fire as tensions escalate in the Middle East. Hello, I'm Isabel Dayman, live from Adelaide. This is ABC News. Also a landslide victory for the country Liberal Party in the Northern Territory. An 8-day mission becoming 8 months for 2 NASA astronauts stuck in space. And the Crows season officially over after a disheartening loss to the Swans. We begin tonight with a major escalation in the conflict between Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. Just before dawn, local time, around 100 Israeli fighter jets carried out a series of airstrikes across southern Lebanon in what the military claims was a preemptive strike. In response, Hezbollah fired hundreds of rockets towards Israel in what it says is stage 1 of a major retaliative operation following the killing of its commander, Fuad Sukkar. Middle East correspondent Alison Horn reports.
Wow. Rocket fire dots the night sky on Israel's border with Lebanon. The distant boom of missiles heralding a new and incredibly dangerous moment in the Middle East. Israel says it had launched missile and airstrikes as a preemptive measure over what it says was a looming Hezbollah attack.
A short while ago, the IDF identified Hezbollah terrorist organization preparing to fire missiles, rockets towards Israeli territory.
Hezbollah says it's fired hundreds of rockets in retaliation to the killing of a senior commander last week.
In a self-defense act to remove these threats, the IDF is striking terror targets in Lebanon from which Hezbollah was planning to launch their attacks on Israeli civilians.
The potential for a regional war has been rising since the suspected Israeli assassination of a Hamas leader in Iran. Israel has been preparing itself for any attack. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a meeting early on Sunday with members of his cabinet. Israel is now in a 2-day state of emergency. Hezbollah is a formidable foe with more than 150,000 rockets in its arsenal. The militia is backed by Iran. All eyes will now be on what Tehran decides to do next.
And Alison Horn filed this update a short time ago about the mood in Jerusalem and the prospect of war.
Well, there's certainly a heightened sense of fear throughout this region as people wait to see how the situation evolves. Officials in Israel have imposed further security measures throughout central and northern Israel, including restrictions on the number of people who are allowed to publicly gather and privately gather together. Schools, universities and workplaces have also been asked to close unless they have access to an immediate bomb shelter. The Israeli military too says it's increasing its readiness around the north. It is still currently striking into areas in southern Lebanon. It is unlikely this Hezbollah attack will be the trigger for an Israeli ground invasion into southern Lebanon, but both Hezbollah and Israel have warned that all possibilities are now in play.
The attacks have sparked concerns of a broader regional conflict, and countries around the world are watching nervously. Foreign Minister Penny Wong has urged all involved to exercise restraint and de-escalate the situation. The ABC's Global Affairs editor, John Lyons, looks at the risks from here.
Iran now holds the key to what happens in the Middle East. The biggest question right now is, what will Tehran do? Hezbollah says it's fired hundreds of rockets in response to the Israeli attack. That's a fraction of its capability. Hezbollah is backed by Iran and it won't engage in a full-blown war with Israel without Tehran's support. Even by itself, the militant group is a far more formidable threat to Israel than Hamas. Hezbollah has as many as 150,000 missiles in its arsenal in southern Lebanon. That's more than enough to overwhelm Israel's Iron Dome missile defence system. So if Iran does decide that now is the moment to attack Israel, it would give the order for Hezbollah to unleash vast numbers of those long-range rockets. The eyes of the world will now be on Iran. How it responds in coming days will determine whether there'll be a regional war.
John Lyons reporting there. An horrific scene unfolded in Sydney's south this morning after a man went on a stabbing spree on a busy road. It's alleged he attacked his partner while driving before crashing his car and attacking others, including a police officer. Dozens of terrified bystanders watched on while others bravely stepped in and tried to help. Sarah Garathy reports.
The shocking aftermath of a chaotic crash. The 58-year-old suspect runs from a police taser while slashing himself with a box cutter before being pinned to the ground and arrested. 5 minutes earlier, the man had been allegedly stabbing his partner while driving erratically along Old Bush Road, then T-boned another car on the Princes Highway.
We heard a big bang and then came out to arguing and then realised that he had a blade.
Bystanders who ran to help were confronted with horrific scenes.
Not thinking about it, I'd started running across the road and not thinking about my own well-being. I was more worried about the lady on the ground and the other guy near the door to get him away from her.
Another man was slashed in the stomach while protecting the woman. He was taken to hospital in a serious but stable condition.
They've obviously gone to render assistance to both people, and then they were faced with a male armed with a box cutter. Quite frightening, but very, very brave on those people's behalf.
We just did what we thought was, right at the time.
Multiple witnesses say the alleged attacker was shouting about conspiracy theories.
He was just yelling like, freedom, you all need to open your eyes, and then he'd swear.
This is where police eventually managed to subdue the man and arrest him. But witnesses have described how when he was first hit with the taser, it barely even seemed to affect the man and he was able to keep running. Looking down here, you can get a sense of how far he was able to run, even while injured, from the scene of the crash. Police say the suspect is known to them and they are treating it as a domestic violence incident.
They were in a domestic relationship. Again, there's no history that we're aware of. There's no apprehended violence orders between the two, but we're definitely domestic related.
The man's partner was taken to hospital in a critical condition. A police officer helping in the arrest was allegedly slashed on the wrist, and 2 other people were injured in the crash itself. The Princes Highway was closed in both directions for hours as police tried to piece together what led to this terrifying crime. Sarah Garathy, ABC News, Sydney.
And if you or someone you know needs help, please contact 1800-RESPECT by phone or their website. The federal government's defending moves to rein in NDIS spending by billions of dollars, saying the debate has been hijacked by misinformation. Legislation passed by Parliament aims to curb spending on the scheme by $14 billion over 4 years. It sets up new powers to investigate fraud and more closely defines what can be funded under the scheme. The Greens and some disability advocates have criticised the changes, saying they amount to cuts. But NDIS Minister Bill Shorten says the scheme will continue to grow.
I listen to the people who say do nothing, change is too hard. These people are dangerous because if we don't do something about the cost growth, there will be no NDIS.
The state government says 48 new beds at the Lowell McEwen Hospital will be filled immediately when they open tomorrow. There's another 20 previously promised beds still to come for the Northern Suburbs Hospital, and an extra 12 will be created to meet growing demand. The government says the Lowell McEwen Hospital has seen a 15% increase in emergency department presentations and a 46% increase in inpatients over the past decade. The equivalent of more than 100 full-time healthcare workers will support the extra beds that are ready to be used right away.
The demand is already here. These 48 beds will open tomorrow, and tomorrow night those 48 beds will essentially be full. because the capacity in the system has been underinvested in for too long.
We would welcome investment in our healthcare system, whether that's extra capacity or extra funding, but we've got real serious concerns about what this means for the 22,000 people that are still waiting on the elective surgery list.
After 8 years in opposition, the country Liberal Party has won government by a landslide in the Northern Territory election. The ABC has predicted the CLP will win 16 of the 25 seats in the NT Parliament, with Labor reduced to just a handful, including losing its former Chief Minister, Eva Lawler.
A historic embrace and a moment of change as the country Liberal Party ushers in a new era of territory politics.
Tonight's result is a victory for hope and opportunity.
Born and bred Territorian and former lawyer Leah Finocchiaro will become the country Liberal Party's first ever female Chief Minister. As of this afternoon, the CLP was predicted to win 16 seats in NT Parliament after running hard on a platform of stamping out crime and helping pull the Territory out of its $11 billion financial hole.
It's an honour and a privilege. We've heard loud and clear that Territorians want change, and the work starts tomorrow to deliver that.
The night saw huge swings against Labor, with the party that ruled for 8 years wiped out, losing key members of its former cabinet, including Chief Minister Eva Lawler, who spoke to party faithful in a sombre concession.
I know Territorians want a change. We've heard that loudly and clearly.
Labor didn't just lose votes to the CLP. The party punished for its handling of environmental issues, with big swings to independents and the Greens.
It shows that when you provide a positive alternative, people will change their vote.
Coalition senators sounding the results as a warning for the Albanese government.
Now that the Northern Territory is delivered a country Liberal Party government, I think the coalition, we can be quite confident in going toward the next federal election.
In terms of what were the key issues in the Northern Territory election, it really is around law and order, very much territory-based issues.
A new leader voted in to try and deliver change to fix some of Australia's toughest challenges. Matt Garrick, ABC News, Darwin.
A new report has revealed the annual number of drug overdose deaths has almost doubled over the past 20 years. The latest figures show more than 2,300 people died in a single year, the vast majority involving 2 or more drugs, often opioids like heroin.
Jen Furby lost her 25-year-old daughter Nicole to overdose in May 2022.
Often I'll have a moment of realisation that I'm never going to see her, and I just cannot believe it.
Nicole died with 4 different drugs in her system. A report from the Pennington Institute found 73% of unintentional overdose deaths involved 2 or more drug types. Opioids turned up in 80% of those deaths, followed by benzodiazepines, antidepressants, stimulants and alcohol. Heroin is driving the increase in opioids, and experts are also worried about the increasing risk of powerful synthetic opioids such as fentanyl and nitazines.
The problem is that they're appearing in counterfeit pharmaceuticals, but they're also appearing in cocaine and in heroin.
The data shows deaths involving stimulants are also increasing.
In relation to Indigenous Australians, we've got a huge overdose problem, about 4 times worse than the general population in Australia.
Pennington Institute Chief Executive John Ryan is calling for a national overdose prevention strategy. He says less than 2% of the drug budget goes to harm reduction, while 2/3 goes to law enforcement.
Even though we know that we can't arrest our way out of these problems.
The Federal Health Minister Mark Butler has labelled the report findings as concerning, and in a statement said the government is actively monitoring the emergence of nitazines alongside continued reforms and investments in drug treatments.
Nicole was Jen's only child. Her grief will be with her forever.
She was my best friend, and I'm pretty darn sure if she was sitting here with us today, she'd say the same about me.
She wants people who use drugs to be part of the conversation about how to save lives. Rachel Carbonell, ABC News.
NASA has decided 2 of its astronauts stuck on the International Space Station since June will have to stay there for another 6 months. NASA made the decision because of safety concerns over Boeing's troubled Starliner craft. It's turning what should have been a week-long test flight into an 8-month odyssey.
What started as one giant leap towards commercial spaceflight has turned into one small step in getting 2 astronauts safely home. After intense deliberation, NASA finally revealed its decision at a sombre press conference.
NASA has decided that Butch and Sonny will return with Crew 9 next February.
Astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams now have to wait for Boeing rival SpaceX's next taxi flight. That's in February 2025 to get back to Earth. This will make what was supposed to be a journey of just 8 days to the International Space Station into one of 8 months.
When the going gets tough, and it often does, the tough get going.
The decision comes after repeated issues with Boeing's troubled new flight capsule called the Starliner. Thruster failures and helium leaks on the way to the ISS, leading to the decision.
The bottom line relative to bringing Starliner back is there was just too much uncertainty in the prediction of the thrusters.
The decision is a blow to Boeing's prestige. The company has been investing heavily in its Starliner system.
Our core value is safety, and it is our North Star.
And followed shortly behind by...
Both astronauts are experienced former US Navy captains with a background in long-duration spaceflight.
The spacecraft will bring us home, no problem.
That training will be tested as they chalk up their long-duration space habitation. Henry Swartz, ABC News.
German authorities have arrested a 26-year-old Syrian man over yesterday's fatal stabbings at a festival in the city of Solingen. The so-called Islamic State group earlier claimed it was behind the attack, which killed 3 festival goers and wounded 8 more. German officials said a terrorist motive could not be excluded, and after a tip-off, raided a refugee hostel. The stabbing attack has reignited the debate on national security in Germany, and the government has called for unity. Finding and keeping a job can be a challenge for some who are diagnosed as neurodivergent, a term used to describe people with conditions like autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. One specialist data company has created a training program aimed at recruiting young people by providing an environment to help them succeed at work.
Kristen Hazeldine quit her job last year after experiencing burnout.
The last couple of years have been gotten progressively harder, and I just couldn't work out why.
The 37-year-old has recently been diagnosed with autism and ADHD. She's now returned to work in a new role with a company which is catering for her needs.
I've got work, and the work is secure, and I can be productive, and I am valued, and I'm safe as well.
And she's not alone. This data firm in Adelaide has altered its office to make it more accessible for people with sensory issues. That includes removing light bulbs from above some desks, on top of other environmental changes.
Just making little adjustments is really easy. Taking out a light bulb above their desk, it's not that hard, yeah.
Workers here use software programs like geographic information systems to map out and visualise data. Now, this has a wide range of uses. Energy networks might need it to know where their infrastructure is located, and telcos might use it to know where the NBN runs. Project leaders want to see other workplaces be more accommodating, to create opportunities for neurodivergent people.
Their brains are definitely more wired to work with big data sets, and they're doing really well.
The program has been supported by a South Australian government grant.
Employing people with disability isn't a cost, it is a benefit, and we want more workplaces to get on board.
For these young people, it's a final piece of their employment puzzle. Isabella Carboni, ABC News.
Each year, tens of thousands of people in Japan suffer so-called lonely deaths, where their bodies aren't found for weeks, months, and sometimes years. Many are elderly and cut off from their community without family or friends. As Japan's population continues to age, some in the community are doing their bit to support the most vulnerable.
This is grim work.
but someone's got to do it. Takuya Shiota has come to clean up a lifetime of possessions after the elderly resident in this apartment died. With no friends or family, the occupant was undiscovered for 3 weeks until her rent went unpaid.
The deceased passed away here, and the smell was quite strong because of the fluids that came out of her body. So we cut out all here and disinfected it.
Japan's suffering from a lonely deaths crisis. For the first time, the government has crunched the numbers. It's now expected some 68,000 people will die alone this year and left undiscovered for a prolonged period.
It's increasing considerably. We do roughly more than 100 cases a year.
Japan is getting older. Its population shrinking. Once bustling suburbs and villages are emptying and elderly people are left vulnerable. It was 20 years ago when Dr. Osamu Yamanaka opened a clinic in one of Yokohama's poorest suburbs. Back then, 4 people a day were dying at home alone, many undiscovered for long periods.
Some were skeletal if no one found them. I was young, and I thought it was unforgivable.
Dr. Yamanaka pioneered home care.
There aren't many people who are willing to deal with people from the lowest strata of society, but he is willing to come to me. I appreciate it.
If I wasn't doing it, there would be an awful lot of lonely deaths.
Services like this are now much more common across Japan, but there will always be limitations. Dr. Yamanaka says communities need to fill the gap.
If they do not socialise with their neighbours, they will end up with a solitary death. It's very difficult to prevent it.
It's a challenge Yoshiko Sato has accepted. At her massive apartment complex on Tokyo's outskirts, there are almost 400 elderly residents living alone. Today, she's visiting one of them. Yoshiko Sato set up a Zero Lonely Deaths program 2 decades ago.
Every year, 4 or 5 people died alone. It was like that constantly.
It established a network of volunteers that check up on local residents, leading to a remarkable improvement in the quality of life.
She usually visits me about once a week. I look forward to cooking with the vegetables she brings me. It's what makes my life worth living.
Yoshiko's mission of Zero Lonely Deaths was soon achieved.
After 5 years, the number of lonely deaths became 0 for the first time.
But she worries about the future. A future where people are becoming more withdrawn from their community.
A community must be built by everyone, but that's not possible in Japan at the moment. People are becoming selfish.
If everyone was more considerate of the people around them or looked after them, there would definitely be no more lonely deaths.
This is a crisis that's only going to get worse. Japan has the world's oldest society with 1 in 10 people aged over 80. And as the country continues to grow old, there's increasing pressure on the government to do more to care for the vulnerable in life and in death. For those on the front line, government support for community groups is a priority.
There is data that loneliness is the biggest factor in shortening life expectancy. In Japan, there's a lack of community ties. I feel it's very common.
A need to keep connections until the inevitable end. James Oaten, ABC News, Tokyo.
Port Adelaide is currently fighting for a home qualifying final as it plays Freemantle in the last game of the home and away season. The Power needs to either win the game or lose by less than 27 points to secure second place on the ladder, with Port Adelaide currently ahead. Ollie Wines has been crucial for the away team so far, grabbing 15 disposals, with forward Mitch Georgiadis booting 2 goals in the first half. Fremantle has its season on the line. A win would secure a Dockers finals berth. Despite resting key players in their final match of the season, the Swans have sent a warning to the competition by defeating Adelaide by 31 points at the SCG. The result secures Sydney the minor premiership, while the Crows will look to next year with hope after a strong showing from their budding forward line.
fresh off the plane after a bitter night at the SCG.
We're disappointed and frustrated. I think I can imagine the fans be very disappointed and frustrated as well.
Adelaide failing to taste success in its last game of the season against the minor premiers in Sydney.
Yeah, I think they were just a bit too good for us in the end. We had some good patches in the game, but they were just probably a class above it.
It was never going to be an easy task, despite the Swans choosing to rest star Isaac Heaney, and that was immediately shown on the scoreboard, Sydney capitalising on a weak Crows outfit.
And he makes Laird pay full price. Good to have him back. Luke Clark.
The home side quickly built up a 5-goal lead, but Adelaide responded in kind, kicking 5 goals of its own to trail by 7 points at quarter time.
He slots it, and they're back in it.
Sydney forward Joel Amati was keen to repeat his 9-goal effort against the Crows in round 14, kicking 2 in the second. The Swans pulling away to lead by 37 at the main break, with help from their signature stars.
Something in the way he moves, Chad Warner.
Adelaide could do little after half-time to claw back the deficit, with Nick Blakey and Logan McDonald joining the score sheet. A small fight back resulting in a 31-point loss for the Crows. But there were promising signs for the future, with Zach Taylor and Riley Thilthorpe kicking 3 goals each. But Adelaide's coach says it's too little too late.
We came into the season, our expectation was to play finals footy, and at the moment we're not playing.
Their season is done, while Sydney has a 2-week rest before hosting a qualifying final. John Longmire hoping the break will see the return of Justin McInerney and Tom Papley.
Hopefully over the next 2 weeks they keep continuing to go the way they are. If they go the way they are, they should be available, so hopefully they're okay.
Daniel Litchens, ABC News.
Australia's Oscar Piastri will start from third for the Dutch Formula One Grand Prix, but says he should have done better in qualifying. Piastri couldn't match teammate Lando Norris, ending up half a second behind the Brit who took pole. Championship leader Max Verstappen starts from second. South Korean golfer Ji Yae Shin will take a one-shot lead into the final round of the Women's British Open at St Andrews in Scotland. 36-year-old Shin moved to the top of the leaderboard with a 5-under par 67. The two-time champion is 1 stroke ahead of American Lilia Vu. Overnight leader Nelly Korda hit her tee shot out of bounds on the 16th hole and is 2 shots behind Shin. Australian cyclist Ben O'Connor continues to lead the Vuelta a España, but his advantage was cut by Slovenia's Primoz Roglic at stage 8. The 3-time champion Roglic attacked on the climb to the finish at Calzora and picked up a time bonus by claiming his 2nd stage win of the Tour. O'Connor lost pace in the last 2 kilometres and crossed the line in 17th. The 28-year-old from Perth is now 3 minutes and 49 seconds ahead of Roglic in the general classification.
It was quite suffering and was hard today, but at the end, the opportunity was there. I went for it now.
Let's take a look at all the weather details now, and thanks to Chris Bollen for tonight's photo of a black-winged stilt feeding in the Dry Creek watercourse near Globe Derby Park. Wet and windy conditions picked up across Adelaide this afternoon after a clear and dry morning. In the city, it reached 18.8 degrees around 11:30 after a warm overnight low of 16. Intense heat across the north saw many locations break August minimum temperature records, but further south, showers persisted throughout the afternoon. It was 27 degrees in Coober Pedy, 21 in Naracoorte. Low cloud in moist, gusty onshore winds will cause showers and strong winds to increase over southwest WA, while high pressure building in the east in the wake of a cold front should cause heavy rain and storms to ease across New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania and our state, keeping the remainder clear and dry. So a hot and sunny top of 35 degrees for Darwin tomorrow, 24 in Sydney, showers and 18 in Melbourne and 22 degrees for Perth. Closer to home, it'll be warm and dry across the north again tomorrow with 22 degrees for Lee Creek and for Port Augusta. Further south, showers will persist over southern coasts and ranges. It'll be 18 in Maitland and 17 degrees across the lower southeast. A strong wind warning continues for the south central and lower southeast coasts. Partly cloudy with a high chance of showers for Adelaide tomorrow, mostly clearing by the afternoon though, a top of 18 degrees after a low of 12. On the waters, westerly winds to 20 knots and seas to 1.5 metres. Sunrise around 6:45, sunset about 5 to 6. Looking further ahead, wind will ease for a mostly sunny top of 23 on Tuesday. There'll be a shower or two and 17 on Wednesday and 18 on Friday and across next weekend. And that's the latest from the Adelaide newsroom. Thanks for your company this evening. From all the team here, have a great night.